go. Okay, it says we're live. I'm just going to check.
Wow.
Hi, everyone. If you are pre-watching. Okay, going to the, of course it doesn't say anything about, okay.
How do we know
you.
on LinkedIn?
I don't know.
Hello, LinkedIn. We don't know if we're here yet.
For all those who might be watching laughing at us, I've changed I have changed service providers for the live streaming. So I am hoping that we are totally live. Okay, shutting this side down. So okay, we're good. So people can laugh at me if they wish to. And actually we are at the halfway mark. So we'll just dive right in to the LinkedIn Live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's been a long time since we've had a Changing Face of Mining episode, and I am super excited to have my friend, Allison Coppel, who is the founder and CEO of Pacha Associates on. We met, I feel like it hasn't been as long as I think it's been, but like in a good way. I feel like it's maybe been about a year or so. And you and I have collaborated on a number of things, including Pacha, which was really a fun project. And that's how we started to work together. And just before I let you introduce yourself, I am going to do a land acknowledgement. This past weekend, I was at my cottage, which is about an hour and a half northeast of me on a lake called Potash Lake. And that is in the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Anishinaabeg. And it's actually named after a chief, Chief Potash, and it's the Crown. The website said bought it, so we'll go with probably some sort of transaction occurred. As to whether or not the parameters of that, I am unfamiliar with. And the lake was named after this particular chief, and that was in 1818, where it was used for hunting and trapping, and it continues to be used for that use. And it's actually called also the land between, and it was the land between Lake Ontario and the Ottawa River, and used for trade routes to move various goods across Turtle Island based on that piece. So if you look at Ontario, we have a little handle that comes down into the United States, and it's in the little handle. So it is really in between the US, it's into the US. So that is where I spent my weekend, and it is a beautiful place to be. Allison, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself before we get into our chat today?
Well, I'll do the same. I've learned that the area where I am, right outside of Washington, D.C., it was from the Powhatan. I do admit I do not know as much as you have researched about the history of where you are. And generally in the U.S., we are behind in acknowledging the long history of the land where we are. So I have homework to do, and you've inspired me already, which is the common thread of every time I talk to you. And I've already talked to you about 3 times today. So I was telling my husband that, since I've started this venture, there are a few people who have come into my life and have just changed the course of my life and my everyday interactions, and you definitely being one of them. It's been about a year, a very intense year since the moment we met and really started connecting. But to actually answer your question, Allison Coppel, like you said, founder and CEO of Pacha Associates. The firm is a little bit over a year old, founded it or started in July of 2024. And this builds off of about 20 years in the mining and different companies. I'm actually 3rd generation Washingtonian, so right back to where I started. But I've had the opportunity to live and work in a couple places in Europe, in West Africa, in South America, across the US, to end up in 2023 exactly where I started. So in 2023, I was working with Newmont based in Denver. And at that point, I'd entered the mining industry in 2006. So it was almost 20 years. And this opportunity came to leave mining and go to energy. So I call it my year abroad in energy, or year abroad from mining. And so that's why we all moved, my husband and 2 daughters, to DC. And I took a role as head of sustainability for this company, which restructured after a year. And so that's when I realized I really want to be on my own and I want to bring together this firm to do the work I love to do. And it was thanks to working with you that I was able to not just come up with the tagline of helping companies transform their community relationships, but realize that that is the purpose. And that is the grounding upon which Pacha Associates was founded. But just to round out the background, before coming into mining, my original career, I wanted to be in the international development space, and I have a first degree in development economics. And then went off to be a consultant for the World Bank. That's how I got to live in West Africa. But it was there that I saw the mining industry. I saw the gold mining industry, and I was very intrigued. And this was a good almost 25 years ago. And they didn't talk to each other. The development area, the development world, and the government in engaging with the development actors like the World Bank and the embassies and development agencies, and the mining companies. And I was really intrigued. I was like, aren't they the ones with hundreds of millions of dollars to invest in Mali? Oh, we don't really talk to them. And I tried to talk to an executive from one of the companies and I was missing messages. So that's when I said, I got to go to business school. The change I want to make is to align these two strategies. This has to be the same business strategy. I didn't know how to articulate it at that time. Did my MBA at Stanford, and from there entered to the mining industry.
Yeah, so cool. I didn't realize, even though I think I maybe wrote it like on the website for you to approve, that you spoke 4 languages. I was
Yeah.
writing the caption for this, the description. I was like, what? How did I miss that piece? How did went right inside my brain and out again? I knew you spoke Spanish. That
Yeah.
makes sense because you have family that's from Latin America, so that makes sense.
Well, my husband's family. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but I didn't realize I actually went back and I like double checked it. I was like, really? 4 languages? That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, my first master's degree I did in France, and I did a part of my undergrad in France. Donc, je parle français pour les Canadiens qui nous écoutent. Avec a slightly different accent than the Canadian accent, but I still understand. And then Portuguese I picked up along the way as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's very common for French and Spanish and English speakers as the Portuguese comes, especially in Latin America.
Yeah, my husband's stepmother actually is from Brazil, and his half brothers are Brazilian.
Okay.
And so yeah, I mean, but French, Spanish, English become part of my daily life. Yeah.
Such an amazing gift. Which is maybe why you've been in my brain. Like literally, we've been on the same like thinking process for the last 2 days. Like you sent me a couple of messages today. I'm like, I was literally just Allison is right in there, apparently.
You are often in my thinking pattern, Peggy, especially of late. I feel like we're in a good dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we are here today. When I was working with you on community engagement stuff, I love the way that you approached maps. And it was really, for me, when you get into socioeconomic development, social performance, community engagement, all of those pieces, I was really used to like data, like census data and all these other things. And you're like, no, just pull out a paper map and let's start to do things. So today's conversation, we are going to do it from a perspective of what if Allison owned a mining company, an exploration of mining company? How would she do things differently than what she's experienced? And how would she position the community engagement, social performance piece around this philosophy you have around mapping? And so let's just start there. Like, so you actually want us to take out a map.
It's interesting. So just a personal anecdote, and then I'll actually answer your question. In my kitchen, I have one of the first things we put on our wall with thumbtacks is a huge map of the area.
Okay.
And it has DC in the middle and Maryland and Virginia. And I had my kids find our house on a map. And, flash forward to a couple client engagements that I've had recently. And to plug one of my podcast episodes where I call it Drawing People on Maps. It's from
Mhm.
season 1 with Sharon Flynn, an amazing practitioner. I go into an exploration office and there are a lot of maps, and usually geology maps. And I look at a lot of maps. You look at a report, 43101, it's a standard mining or project report or a number of reports. And I look at them and I have no idea in the world where they are. No idea. And especially now with digital age, like you can use your Waze and Google Maps and get from point A to B, and you still don't know where you are on a map.
Yeah.
So the very first piece of advice that I have for companies and people, but let's talk to companies, is where is your project on a map? Where is your operation on a map? And I call it a people map.
Mhm.
The map that you are going to give your parents to come find your house, a people map.
Yeah.
And the way I was taught, I was taught before we all had it on our phone, where we would use one of those big printers and I would print it out on the table. And, I've worked with exploration teams for a long time, and I was training this one team, I remember, in Mexico. And we would put it on the table, and everyone had to take their different color marker. And I said, where do you think is the social area of influence for this project? When
Mhm.
you think of the community, because we talk about, the community, like everyone knows what that is,
Mhm.
and I said, you draw your the community. Vroom. And I do this in training a lot too, in a high level scenario. The next geologist says, I said, where's the community for you? Vroom. And you start drawing different circles.
Ah,
And
okay.
you start realizing pretty quick. I just had this conversation this week. I'm doing a request for a proposal for a project. Said you need to study the socioeconomic study of the local area of influence. They didn't define that for me. So I started to talk to somebody who's familiar with that area. And I said, where do you think the local area is? And she gave me 3 different versions of and she's a specialist from that area.
Yeah.
So long story short, it starts with, and I call it, figure out where your neighborhood is. Like I'll be I was at a mining investment conference last year at Beaver Creek Precious Metal Summit. And it's mostly mining investors or junior exploration projects looking for investments. And you'd be talking, and it pretty quickly, they go around with their physical presentation in their hand, and they want you to see it. And it's beautiful, it's printed, it's colorful, there's all these different maps. And a number of them, I just look at them, I say, in what country do you want me to invest my money?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, it's this country. And where exactly?
Yeah.
Well, it starts with the map. It starts with, and defining, where are you going? Like, you're moving. You want me to move money there? What's your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Put it on the map, and then tell me why you put it with that circle. Why wasn't it that community? It was this community and not that one. And you probably have a reason in your head, either the watershed or culturally. I just found out this one in this area that I'm developing this proposal for. This one Native American tribe is also considered by the company as local. I said, why? They're way up here. Well, they're part of this historical treaty.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't see, you didn't explain that criteria to me. I'm not from that area. I wouldn't have automatically known. So I go on and on about maps because it starts with grounding physically. Where is this project?
Yeah.
Where are we going to work?
That's such an interesting, for me, working in like assay sales. And so you're trying to figure out where is the project in relation to your closest depot or your closest lab or whatever. And the number of junior minor websites that I've been on that I've been like, I don't know. I like there
Oh, you have
there's
no
no
idea.
map at all. Or like this map that's this big and it's a picture, so I can't zoom in or zoom out into like, is it? And then I start Googling the project, and every project has 5 different names. So hopefully you get a
You're
product.
supposed to know. Right.
Right? Depending on how old the project is, how long the project's been around, and how many times it's changed hands, it could be named many different things. So I love the idea of this map. And also, too, like with the environment, you get watersheds and then you get water moving around, and that can really change how your community expands or contracts based on environment, physical environment as well.
Exactly, and what I tell teams a lot is your social area of influence can be different from your environmental area of influence. Most permitting structures makes you do some sort of environmental assessment, and it's pretty prescriptive of how you define that area of influence. And I've had teams say, "Oh, no, but that community's outside of that." I said, "But all your workers come from there, or a large percentage. Explain to me why that's not part of your social area of influence." Oh, oh, it could be different. Yes, yes, it can.
Interesting. So
Anyway, that was just how excited I get about maps. But you asked me a bigger question, so why don't we continue on about that? Of
yes,
Allison gets to own a mining company.
you
Tell me
do.
more about this fantasy that you have for me.
Well, so you own a mining company and you're like trying to figure out what to do with a project. Like how does that even work? So like does it start like when you are trying to buy a product? Does it start later in the process? Like when should we pull out the map in as a leadership team to figure out what it is that we do?
So my fantasy for owning let's call it just an
Yes.
exploration company, early stage. It's people first
Okay.
with a holistic environmental approach. So let me first explain that because then we'll get to the maps.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we rush to the map, but
Okay.
we gotta pull back before we get
I
there.
was thinking we were too delayed in the mapping, but it's good to
Oh
know
no,
actually.
we got to pull back because who are these people? The people first is who is this team?
Mm,
How did this team come together? Why? What are the values of this team? One of my mentors, Steve Enders, if you happen to be watching this from Colorado School of Mines,
mhm,
you gave the keynote speech at Beaver Creek Precious Metal Summit last year on around how mining companies, or sorry, projects don't fail because of the rocks. They fail because of the people. They
mhm.
fail because of the management teams. And a lot of times, again, just imagine this image. You're at a conference and you get shoved this deck of all this beautiful geology and colors and rich technical information, but I know nothing about you because from Stanford I have a strong network in the entrepreneurial space and venture space and have my ear into a lot of conversations around fundraising, but fundraising usually around tech type of startups. And the what fundraisers, what venture capital firms and private equity and other angel investors look at, it's yes that there's a proof of concept on this product, in our case the rocks,
Mhm.
but much more of who am I investing in, what are the values of this person when this proof of concept doesn't work, when they're stressed, when everything goes wrong. That's when your values come out because that's what's still consistently going to be in place. That's what I'm betting on because in mining, we don't control the product. The product is there.
Right.
We control everything upstream from that in a way. We control our costs. We control what we understand and manage around our risks and our impacts, and we control ourselves. But so often we're so rushed into this proof of concept and where is the project and how much gold or copper or lithium is in that project, we forget that what we're actually betting in, because exploration projects don't produce anything. The only reason they have economic value is because they're eventually going to be sold. Most exploration firms don't have the vision to be the operator.
Yeah.
So if it is going to be the operator, eventually you want to actually get to that operation, or eventually you want to sell to the next firm down the line. And that value is, yes, some of the product, but mostly, even if people aren't or investors aren't explicitly recognizing that, is how much do I trust this plan?
Yeah.
And I trust this plan because I trust the people, and I trust the people because I know what values they are bringing to every single decision. I know how they work. And so first it's about who is this people first team and how they treat each other, because that's how they're going to treat me. That's how they're going to treat the people around them. So it's who are these people first in this people first approach? And then the holistic aspect of the environment, of which minerals are one part, as is the water, as is the air, as is the biodiversity. All of this has to work together so that we get that economic value out of the minerals. And so when we isolate just that concept of the mineralization and forget that this is one piece of a holistic environment, already, we are missing our understanding of the environment. So my approach, I mean, I went to business school. I'm here to make money. I've seen out of 20 years in the industry that in this business, you make money when you understand the whole business. You understand the people, you understand the environment, and you understand the mineralization. So my vision is to make sure that whole concept of a philosophy, a value, and a management system is in place. Then I'll start looking at projects.
Ah.
And then once I see the project, the very first thing I do is they usually give me a project like this project's called computer.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. I'm looking at a computer. I'm obviously not the marketing guru on the team. So, computer has this much gold and it's in this blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, where is this project? So a lot of times, like I was just looking at a set of projects. I do a lot of due diligence. I had to go back to the proponent no fewer than 3 times, 2 or 3 times, to get a map that I could somewhat use. And I finally got a sort of a map that I gave to my intern, Abel, who's a PhD student in computer science. I was like, somehow these are clues that are going to get me to a Google map. Can you figure this out? So Abel figured out how to get me on a Google map.
Yeah.
And we started to map out the site. And so once I could map out the site or the project proposal area, I could see, is this near a community? Where are the people? And so one of my favorite conversations I have with project proponents, they're like, "Oh, don't worry, there's no people." There are always people. I've been to I've worked in the Amazon jungle. I've worked in the Atacama Desert. I've worked in the middle of nowhere, Mali, near Timbuktu. There are always people.
Yeah.
You just don't see them. I tell this project, I'm like, just because I say you're kind of like a toddler playing hide and go seek with a, sheet over their head. Just because they don't see you does not mean you don't see them.
Yeah.
So situated on a map, draw physically that circle, define the criteria that made the circle this shape and not that shape, and then start understanding the people, the history, the environment. What is there that will be this project with your team, of which, yes, the economic sale of this mineralization is a key component.
Yeah. Which that creates the whole story, or I shouldn't say creates the story. That's another layer of that story, right? That you're selling is that you now understand the history and why you're there. You mentioned 2 things. The one was the gentleman from Colorado School of Mines at Beaver Creek talking about what would delay a project. And I was writing the content this weekend for women in mining. And the first one I was talking to somebody about the Lassonde curve. And my theory has always been that if we, unless it is maybe propping up aspects of the industry, which it could be, but you go through that area or that time of orphan period where it dips down and nothing happens at the project, which could be extended or delayed, depending on what happens, that if we had social acceptance from the beginning, that orphan period becomes shorter. We don't have that same delay because people wanted to go forward. And then so that Lassonde curve flattens or continues to go up as opposed to that big, huge trough and then go up. And the other piece was
The Lassonde curve, for the people I invited to the session who are not the miners.
Yes.
What is that?
Oh, the Lassonde curve is so it's named after Pierre Lassonde, who has a mining school named after him, but it was like the idea of how investment relates to project development. So you will go through these phases of how your stock price correlates to the development phases of the project. And so you'll get it to about feasibility, and then it dips drastically. And that's what they call the orphan period. So it just sits there. Somebody owns it. And it could be when you go through various delays to get it into commissioning or what have you. That's when that big dip happens. It might change hands, it might do other things, and then hopefully you get it to the point where it is going into commissioning construction and it starts to move back up again, and then your stock market price goes up. So that in that orphan period could be months, probably not. It's probably closer to years. And so if that product needs to get to market, say copper, you want to shorten that orphan period as much as possible, right? For various, and so there's, who knows why the delay happens, but like there's many different reasons. So a management team, hopefully, if they're wanting to take it, either sell it or take it to market, that product is looking at shortening up that orphan period.
That's exactly it. Two things come to mind. One, that shape of the curve. I do a lot of tradings where I quote a study around measuring social license in mining. And it was done by two gentlemen in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Ian Thompson and Robert Betoulier. Sorry, Robert, if I mispronounce your last name. I don't know if it's in the French or American pronunciation. But anyways, they were one of the first thought leaders around the concept and really measuring the concept of social license in mining. And they did a study over a number of years of a single mine site and measuring through their methodology of how much trust and from legitimacy, as I accept you're there, to I trust you, meaning I'm going to advocate for you. I blindly just accept for what that you're there. And they did it over the years of the phases of this single site. And what they found is in exploration, it's building that trust level. And as you get to the eve of construction, it's the highest level. And then construction happens and it drops. And I use this as a training discussion piece for teams to say, why does it drop? And is that drop inevitable? And, this reminds me a lot of the curve.
Yeah.
Which also opens up another door of, there's a lot of talk right now in policy, at least in the US and a number of other countries, around shortening the permitting timeline, that permitting is the issue, that permits are late, that it takes so many years to permit a mine, and that's a problem. And not to discount that there are some issues with, especially in the US, with the permitting system that need to be fixed. A lot of that delay is exactly in line with what you just shared. I'm talking to another project right now, trying to convince them to partner with me, is because they technically have all their permits and they're just waiting to get their investment to start constructing. They have no social performance, external relations, whatever you want to call it, person on their team. They have no formal approach to engaging the community. And I spoke to the head of the project and he told me, he goes, yeah, but I have these letters of support, so I'm fine. And I said, yeah, but what does that mean? Like, letters of support, like, help me understand, like, because if I'm going to write a letter from the Chamber of Commerce, yeah, I support that one day there's going to be, some economic investment in my town that will get my businesses, with more business. But that is a different concept. If I trust you, your goal in this is to make sure that the business that is not selected for this project is okay with you. You just told me all of this. It's good because we're going to give, I don't remember what it was, like 300 permanent jobs to this poor community. And I said, that's great. What about the 10,000 people that are about to apply to those 300 jobs? And you have to explain to the 9,007 or 669 people, is that math right? Yes. Why they didn't get selected. That is your goal. And that takes a systematic approach where there's this concept that the work stops because we're waiting for investment. And
Mm,
back to what you were saying around the curve, there's this concept that we're doing all this work now because of the drilling and the results and whatnot, and studying with the lab. And then we just wait. The work with the community starts the second you show up, and it actually should start way before you even show up.
yeah.
And it continues all the way through.
Yeah.
And even more so because you are not physically there with all your drills and whatnot, but you are waiting to turn that light switch back on the day that your investors show up or the permits, get their stamp of approval. And you think that, boom, this relationship light is now just going to get turned on. And that is not the case. But that is how so many projects operate. So they get so confused why they had these, they drilled, they waited for the results, they paid a consultant to write the permit documents, they put it in the system, they had the mandatory public hearing. Everyone showed up because they were curious.
Mhm.
And then no one's putting the stamp of approval on these permits. And it's like, well, why is that?
Mhm.
Like, well, what relationship do you have? Do you have a permanent presence here? Do they trust you? What regulator is going to tie their political capital on a project where they do get flooded with questions from community members who don't understand what's going on? And all you get is some very long, long, long technical document to even understand. So I think that lack of, if you always have that people first approach and the holistic environment approach, then you're not going to have this curve that goes up and down in terms of the relationship and the project, and tied to a concept that only goes on and off if there's a physical drill rig or a certain amount of investment money that comes to the door, because your project is born the second you thought of it.
Yeah.
And it has to have that continuation in a consistent way. Otherwise, you are going to see either in the trust curve or the stock price curve, which, if you think about it, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's
Um,
correlated. Mhm.
that's to me why you have those up and down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like, yeah, like get that storefront if you can with the person there to answer questions and or what have you, whatever that engagement strategy looks like. So if you're a leader with this exploration company and you have three different circles on this map, what do you do with those? Does the circle naturally then widen to encompass all three, or how do you go through that process of actually defining what that physical area of influence is?
Well, that's why you have a management system process. That's why you have a formal process in place. When I work with teams and I say, you don't have a system in place, they're like, oh, no, we're not making the school donations yet. I'm like, well, that's like literally I think I have it like step 7 or 8 in the system. So you
Mhm.
don't have a system, you don't have a process. So the first process is coming together and saying, we're going to define the area of influence. And this is why we need a team approach to that process and a criteria based approach, because as we draw the 3 different versions of the map and we realize there's 3 different versions, then we enter into a discussion just like you would do a risk assessment of a big operation.
Mhm.
Usually have more than one team together and you come up with the risk methodology of, is this high, medium, or low, and why, and what's our understanding of it. It's the same thing. You have a formal process where you discuss and you align on criteria to define the area of influence. And then you set, just like a risk assessment, you either look at it every 6 months or every year, or, whenever your frequency is, you set that frequency to look at your area of influence, because the context changes, people change, the community changes, your project changes. So I usually tell teams either every year or every time there's a significant change to your project footprint. You're opening up a new drill area, we're going to go back to the meeting again. We're going to do the same. We're going to set the criteria to define our area of influence, and we're all going to align on a map.
Oh, I like that. So it just keeps on revisiting as the project progresses. You're constantly going back, is what I'm understanding, to that first stage where you're like, okay, has this changed? How has this changed? What are we now needing to do within the community or within that process to ensure that we continue to um,
where we focus, where we start.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was going to
Yeah.
use the term social license to operate because, and I don't know if it's the same in your area of influence from a work perspective, but it was like around social license to operate being it is not a one and done. You don't gain social license to operate and then assume that you now have it and just continue on to work. It is something that you need to continuously go back to obtain and to keep is a constant process. It's not a okay, well, got it, on we
Done.
go.
That's actually I like using terminology social acceptance,
Mm,
and I like the objective of obtain and maintain long-term social acceptance.
yeah.
I find that that helps people realize that this isn't a check because I've seen way too many teams like, "Oh, we have that social lessons." Like what I've recently heard, "I have letters of support." Check. Like, no, it's not a check. It's an obtain and maintain social acceptance. And that is this ongoing process. But even to what you just asked, teams ask, well, I don't have money yet to deal with the communities. It's,
Mm,
um, what I just described doesn't really cost any money. It's just understanding what the work is and then just doing it. It's having a formal hour with a map.
mm,
We can do it digitally if you're too poor to print, and physically draw that circle and define the criteria. It's about a different way of working and revisiting that way in a structured way so that we understand from where we're starting.
yeah. And as a leader, are you going out to do to go to the communities and to enter into that coffee shop to talk to them, or are you sending other folks in?
Well, it depends who the other folks are. I mean, if it's our small, my dream company in the beginning that we're this small, amazing team, I want to. It's very important for companies to build their own relationships. I mean, now that I am a consultant and I've been asked by, projects like, okay, you go out and consult to all these people. I said, no, I'm going to teach you how to build a relationship. My job as the consultant is to make sure you have long-term relationships, not me. It's not a thing that you can just outsource. So
Right.
the company has to build its own relationships. And so absolutely, I'm the person sitting in the coffee shop and talking to the town and listening and learning just what goes on here. How does this town operate?
Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
because like the branding. So obviously, I come at these things oftentimes from a brand perspective, right? And that is your brand. I think that's sometimes a bit of a missing gap is that we think of brand as logos and colors, and yes, that is part of what a brand looks like. But your brand is how you show up to your stakeholders and your rights holders and your employees. Like all of that is your brand. Is that everybody? You need to build that brand equity and that trust with everybody that you interact with, regardless of what their role is. And that's how you build the trust and you maintain it, is because you've created. So it's almost like two sides of the same coin in many different ways.
I like how you put that because, a lot of my practice, um, I mean, try not to go down too far of a rabbit hole. It's not what I do, but you just made me have this huge connection because you said that is your brand. That's how you show up. That's how people trust you because you have this consistent way that you show up and that they expect and you fulfill that expectation. And that's a key part of this work because a lot of companies think that, if they're not negatively impacting the communities and the environment around them, and they're also benefiting, they do give that school donation and they do support the local clinic or whatnot, and those are very good things. To me, that's the baseline. Like, don't do no harm.
Yeah.
And people, you're about to be here for a very long time, so I gotta feel good about you being here too, not
Mhm.
just not feel bad. Those are very good things. But what people don't realize, what actually drives trust, and here I'm quoting and just parentheses to this, it's so cool being a consultant because I get to work with the people that I've admired for a long time.
Mhm.
So one of my clients, Kieran Moffat, who's CEO of Vaconic, which is this Australian firm um, that has a data tool that actually helps measure what I'm going to describe. It's called the Local Voices Program. Is a key aspect of what they measure is what's called procedural fairness. So it's about the most of the trust is derived from you having a consistent, transparent, and fair experience with a company. Now, think about that. And that's kind of where I got off on this, is because what you were saying about a brand, you go to McDonald's, no matter where you are in the world, you expect a consistent experience that defines McDonald's,
Mhm.
right? This is the same way. Is if I see you, Peggy, as, let's just be in this company together, right? And you're also in this town with me, and you're in the supermarket, and someone knows that you're from this company and they interact with you, they want to feel respected and the same way that they do interacting with me. But say there's someone else in our team who didn't really get the memo and they're just rude to that person, or ignore them, or brush them off, or say something really wrong, that person, that's going to bring the whole reputation down of the company, because that stakeholder, that person living that community, did not have that consistent experience. And what companies don't realize is that this concept is 100% in their control. They think that this outside community stuff, it's like, oh, I don't know, that's like that external stuff. We'll just hope and pray it works. And that's usually like this company I just described that's waiting for its financing before it constructs. That's their strategy. We're just going to hope and pray they still like us, where that makes it all external.
Mhm.
Whereas most of the work is actually internal, because like what you just described, I control my brand. I control how people can have this consistent experience with me. We can control if it's a fair experience, if it's a transparent experience, and we can control if we are demonstrating that we are listening and hearing them, and that they walk away from that interaction feeling heard, and with the same consistency as, the McDonald's from down the street as the McDonald's as up the street. So
Mhm.
what you just said about brand, I never really connected it in that way, is exactly how I view social acceptance. Because a lot of companies, especially right now, honestly, in the US, they're so focused on, oh, all we have to just tell them is how many jobs and tax revenue that we're going to produce, and that's it. I'm like, that's good. I'm not going to say it's bad, but that's secondary to how you show up consistently. And if you don't have a procedure in place, for example, to make those 9,699 workers feel that they were treated fairly in that hiring process, that's actually in your control. Yeah, they're not going to support you. You're not looking for support. They're probably, after getting rejected from that job, but if they feel like they were treated fairly in a transparent way, and the people that were selected, they don't just say, oh, it's because that person's brother, a cousin, sister, daughter, that they're like, oh, they applied and they got it. I
Yeah.
don't like it, but I trust it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. I'm sure we could probably talk about this for hours, but there's many
I
ways that
totally can talk about this for hours. That's why you're interviewing me, so I don't talk about this for hours. Help me not go into the rabbit hole.
but like I'm sure there are many synergies or two sides of the same coin when it comes to
Yeah.
brand and community like engagement, because I also know like we would call it social listening or brand perception, where you go on Facebook to say, hey, what are our customers saying about us on the internet, whereas you would do the same thing potentially with community engagement, as far as what's the community saying about us on the internet, on Facebook or what have you. It's many of the same layers. And yeah, I have a whole thing in my head that will probably come out at AEMA. So plug for that. If you're coming to AEMA, to the Mind Marketing Summit, is about how your brand is actually, you bake it into those KPIs, and how you operate is baked, your brand is baked into, and how you measure your success and all these other things. And that's how you build that trust, whether it's with communities or with clients or however. It's all very much centered around your brand values and how you show up for whoever is
Oh, I
important to
wish I
you
could
in your
go to the conference in Reno. I have a client. It's really cool. I have a client trip that week, so I cannot go. But I'd
yeah.
like to know more about that, because I mean, just to finish plugging, client I work with, Vaconic, that
Yeah.
is what they do because a lot of companies go out, they're very good at having perception studies. And I
Yeah.
like how you tied that to the concept of social listening and how how your brand is viewed. Because the what companies the error that companies do is they want to ask people, what do you think about me?
Mhm.
Versus, and this is what the Vaconic Local Voices program really focuses in on, how are you experiencing me?
Yes,
Which is a
exactly.
different concept.
Yeah.
And that's more about, how do you think I'm listening to you?
Yeah.
How do you experience the decisions that I make? How do you feel like I take what your experience is into account in my decisions?
Mhm.
Which is a different when I sit there with companies like, "Oh, yeah, we have a perception study, we do it every year." I'm like, "Yeah, that is helpful, to ask people, what do you think about this?"
Mhm.
But that's actually not the key to truly understanding if they trust you, because there's a lot of "What do you think about maybe having a job?" "I think that's great."
Yeah. I think it's wonderful.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, what are you really asking me? What do
Yeah.
you think that my truck backed up into your lawn and didn't say sorry and now you have a mess?
Yeah.
I didn't like that. I
Yeah.
don't trust you. The
Yeah.
two can happen at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it's that moment of like, well, I think it's great that I'm going to make money for 20 years. I don't know that it's great that you're going to be leaving the community in 30 and potentially uprooting economic, gain and stuff like that. So, like, how do you build the trust around that economic piece about,
Oh, yeah.
job versus long-term development, right? Like, because the
Yeah.
trust is held in the long-term development potentially, not so much in that job, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is how Allison and Peggy run a mining company.
Yeah. Potentially like sending voice notes back and forth to each other as
I think I don't know, Peggy, I think we might be onto
it might
something,
be
but
onto something.
when you start thinking about this even before the project happens, that's back to your first question, that's how I see it, and that's where I see so many companies miss the opportunity. And then what I'm betting on is that your color design is better than that color design. Because if there's one thing I've learned, I have a lot of geologist friends, and they're a really awesome branch of the mining industry.
Love
They don't
geologists.
always see eye to eye. I mean, I'm thinking that this, kind of, subsurface map of the geology. I'm thinking it's 1 + 1 = 2. I always joke in my area, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. And I had this geology say, my area either. It's there's a lot of I find that a lot of geologists don't agree.
No.
And so um and so it's not always just the fundamental piece to deciding the value of our company.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to tell my good technical friends who I enjoy and have a very binary world sometimes that they live within, that in my world it was always with regards to market intelligence and what was going to happen in 5 years time in the commodity space. And I'd always be like I do not deal with plus or minus 0.2%. I deal with plus or minus 10%. So like I live in a very one plus one does not equal two in my world either, but we
Yeah.
can make the 2 look nice, but we just don't know what that's actually gonna be the case. So, but very good. Okay, so I have one final question, and I purposely never tell people this. Not that I wanna put people on the spot, but I never tell them the final question because I like to see what the honest responses are. So what would the Allison of today tell the Allison of 2006 when she got into mining?
That is a good question.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a blast.
I love it. That's good.
I mean, I've gone to 2006, moved to Chile, I've graduated from the MBA. I convinced Gonzalo, who was my boyfriend, I guess, at the time, that we should move to Chile. He then decided, why don't we get married and get engaged and move to Chile? So we moved to Chile. I started mining, and I start going on this path where I'm in six corners of the earth, meeting fascinating people along the way, learning more about so many aspects of business and communities and life, that it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And that life is going to be amazing.
I like that. And if I remember your t-shirt purchases, because I'm still in the phase of the t-shirts where I can remember what most people buy. Hopefully not for
Remember this when you're like with so many t-shirts branded on every mine site around the world. You're like, I used to remember what your purchase was.
That's the goal, right? Get into every single operation that's out there. Exploration site, operations, whatever. Is that you do have a purple one, I believe, of I Put the Fun in Mining.
It's my favorite shirt. I kind of wish that you would relaunch that one.
Well, there may or may not be a vault collection happening at some point where the former designs do make a comeback, depending on how that works. That might be percolating in my brain. So
good. That's my favorite. I wear that all the time. There's been some hard moments. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat a lot of things. Working in a big corporate organization there are some frustrating days. Working in, traveling sounds super luxurious and fun. There comes to a point, when your kids are little at home and or wherever your life is when you're not working is meaningful. And you're just still on the road and you're writing text messages to a nanny, 7 hours behind on how to pick up your kid from school because the school called me because you're sick. Like there are some insane days and I'm just like, what did I get myself into? And I dragged, in my case, all these people with me.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, and my favorite part of being an entrepreneur is I get to spend every day with the people I want to spend the day with.
Yes.
Period.
100%. I have definitely
That's it.
Yeah. One client I have right now, I counseled them recently. I'm like, you don't have to work with them. And they're like, you're right, we don't. And I'm like, choose the people you want to work with.
That is 100%. That is the best part of this experience.
Yeah. 100%.
And actively, like if I want to leave 5 voice notes with Peggy today, I will do that. And guess what? It's so cool because you leave 5 voice notes back.
Oh yeah.
And that wasn't like perfectly worked out as part of my agenda today. And that is okay.
Yeah. 100%. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was fun. I enjoy it.
Oh, it's what a treat is I got to have you for a whole hour and not just like a 30-second voice note here and there. Yeah, thank you. I love this platform that you have, Peggy, and that you use it to showcase different people's experiences and views. I mean, in preparation for today, I was looking at some of your former episodes. You get some superstars of the mining industry, and I learned a lot just in prep. And I realized, I mean, I'm confessing I hadn't watched it before, but I am now, and I am hooked. And I think what you're doing is incredible, and how you've been helping, especially women like myself, launch their, their enterprises and their vision. You have a gift. So thank you for sharing your gift with so many people.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's fun. Like everybody else, there's days where I'm like, oh gosh, this is hard. And then there's other days where I'm like, well, this is a lot of fun. And lately it's been a lot of fun. So we're just going to keep on going down that path.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Amazing.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Oh, and I should just say for those listening, they can find you at, I believe it's Pacha-Associates.com. And Pacha Associates on LinkedIn is also there. And Allison obviously has a LinkedIn as well. So there's many different ways to find you. And until next time, I believe next month, so these are now going to monthly because. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to throw in, if you're just loving the sound of my voice, you can listen to Planet People Mining. And if you understand Spanish, Planet People Mining in Espanol, and my other wonderful intern, Carla, now takes this transcript every time and translates it into English. And so you can at least follow along, or if your Spanish isn't, you're like okay in it, or you just want to know what we talked about, because I talked with some pretty amazing people. You can follow along with the transcript. And then, thanks to that suggestion that someone made in just engaging with the post, I was like, oh, I didn't think of that before. That's what I love about being an entrepreneur. You can just add stuff on.
Yes.
So the next season in English, which I'll be launching, my goal is by the SME conference in February, we'll be, doing the transcript in Spanish, so we can just have a whole community. And that's part of the work with Pacha Associates that I love, is bringing this ecosystem of amazing collaborators together. And so you can be involved in just being a listener.
Oh, that's so cool. I do listen to the English one, but I didn't realize that the Spanish one had English translations. So because my Spanish is very limited to like metallurgy of all things, but so I'm glad that also exists. So perfect. Yeah. So Planet People Mining, and that is, sorry, the Spanish one is on Spotify, if I remember correctly, and the English one is on
both on Spotify, Apple. I have a single YouTube. They're on different ones. So some people are like, I was looking for the Spanish or the English. It's Planet People Mining in Espanol.
Yeah.
And then in the YouTube podcast channel, it's all in one.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you.
Thank you. This was so fun, Peggy. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I look forward to we'll have you back at some point, because exciting things happen. And then so we're going to about monthly, and then in November, November it's going to be finance and investment related. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. So
all right. Well, good. Well, big hug to you. It felt like we just hung out for an hour, which truly was a treat.
So it's so easy. Okay. We will thank you everyone for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your week.